Hello everyone, my name is Dana Connors. It's my pleasure to welcome you today to the Maine Take. As you well know, this is a program brought to you by the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. And as usual, we take a look at some of the issues, ideas, and initiatives at work in our state, hoping to improve the lives and the livelihood of our people, but also to move the economy forward. Well, I have just been told that we have a guest that has all of those qualities that I just spoke of. A lot of ideas, a lot of issues, a lot of initiatives, and I'm supposed to interview him. As a matter of fact, I've been looking forward to this because of the number of times he's interviewed me. But I've just been told that that's the reverse. He is still going to interview me in spite of the fact I wanted to interview him. But I do welcome him. He's a great friend and a wonderful person to have on news these days. Don Kerrigan.
Thank you, Dana. Great pleasure to be here with you. And we've talked a lot of times over the years, the 30 years roughly that you've been head of the Chamber of Commerce, and even before that. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that we could talk a little bit about, because you're about to retire and step away from the Maine State Chamber, and I thought the people of Maine, and certainly the people who were close to the Chamber, would benefit from hearing kind of how you look at things from this vantage point.
You mean at this time in my life when I'm about to close that chapter of career-wise, you mean?
Yeah, and how more important, how you look at Maine. You've seen a lot of things happen in Maine. You've seen us go kind of from what I sometimes refer to as the old Maine to the Maine we have now. And what you see as having followed that transition, but also where you see we're going, because you've got terrific insight and experience, and that's valuable.
Well, I've had lengthy insight and experience. I started, and the only reason I say this is because it kind of reinforces what you said about length of time and how things have changed. And I started at the ripe age of 23, turned 24 the next month as city manager, and I thought that was the job of a lifetime. It was a dream come true. And that was because, at that age, I'm not saying this about everybody, thought I knew more than I did and made decisions pretty easy. More so than that same decision 10 years later or even 10 years after that, because the more you know, the more difficult sometimes things are in terms of making decisions.
The more you know, the more you realize what you don't know.
Absolutely true. It's not a joke, it's the truth. But the council was so supportive. It probably was the foundation that was given to me that helped me throughout my other two jobs, and that is take a risk. If you don't take a risk, there will not be rewards. You can't say no in order to get to yes. So whenever you made a misstep, you learned from it, they supported it, and you went on to the next one. I can't say enough about what that does to a person to encourage them to step out and to do the things that you think are necessary. So that was a time when I'm from Aroostook County. The potato industry was very strong. Main Street was robust, and things were good. I went from there to DOT as commissioner in January of 1984, not because I wanted to leave, but because, in fact, I thought I'd be there for my whole life. I loved it. And I went to DOT as commissioner under Joe Brennan and stayed under Jacques McKernan for the 11 years. And the first year I was there, I thought, I think I made a mistake. I loved what I had. But after that one year, when I became accustomed and saw how loyal the people of that department, the professionals of that department were, I fell in love with it. And I couldn't draw a line straight, and you were in a department of statistical brightness, in which
surrounded by engineers,
absolutely, and they were incredible. And so what I learned during that process,
there, so you can stick it in your pocket,
good,
jacket pocket, if you can get it there.
I can.
This is a podcast, so we can do these things.
Yeah, that wasn't. It really, what it taught me and what I was able to see about the state and so forth in that first job was a city that was dynamite. They were aggressive, they were positive, and they were encouraging. And that set in my my mind, that's a community that should be replicated everywhere because it was so positive. I go to DOT and found that the state was so dependent on transportation. We have more road. I mean, we're larger than in size than the rest of New England combined. We have more roads than New Hampshire, Vermont, and the western half of Massachusetts. And we were so dependent on transportation. The challenge was always understanding that transportation was a foundation of the economy, both in terms of moving people safely, but products efficiently, that every dollar that you spent needed to be spent wisely, and every person had a project that they wanted. It was important to them, but you didn't have half the money you needed to be able to address it. And so I found that at that time in my life, that the state was strong. It was dealing with some financial budget concerns, which comes and goes through the course of time, depending on the economy and what's taking place. And then I moved into this position, and I've been here for almost 30 years. And I find that for the same reason I love the other two, I love this one, is that there's so much you can do, so much that's needed to be done, and you live in the middle of all of that. And you work with people. In order to be effective, you have to listen to people. You got to do so with respect, and relationships are fundamental to whatever you do. And when I look at the state today with a strategic plan that we have that sets forth what
this is the economic development plan for the state?
Exactly.
Yep.
The beauty of that, and strategic plans have been tried before because I was part of them, but they always failed in that, I would guess more than anything else, they weren't inclusive enough. They were top down. This one of 1,300 people was anything but top down. And what this plan did for us in 2019 as a state, set forth a roadmap that if you look at the priorities of workforce, innovation, housing, childcare, broadband, transportation, and then it goes on, that if you keep your eye on the prize, what that strategic plan tells you, not only, and this was in 2019 when it was passed, how that helped us during the pandemic, and how it helps us now look to the future and follow that. Our economy will be stronger because of it.
So how do you think overall, and there's always gaps, there's always going to be particular problems you could point to. Overall, how strong or not is Maine's economy right now?
Oh, it's stronger than is given credit for. I mean, let me go back a step. I think that the 3 years of the pandemic, which we're on the other side of it in terms of impact, has been a real eye-opener. I've always felt that Maine has that entrepreneurial spirit. They have a resilience that's hard to match. They have a work ethic that is comparable or exceeds most other places.
You think that's still true?
Oh my God, yes, it's true. And we have challenges. I mean, we know that when we've done Making Maine Work, which is a series that you're familiar with, that look at various issues, that there are 3 categories of workforce. And when we first started it, skill was at the top, professional level was in the middle, and the entry was the least. And over the course of the previous 2 gubernatorial cycles, professional has gone to the top, skill was down, and entry moved up a bit. This last one we just did, it was the entry level that there was the highest calling for people in that category. So I think that the pandemic has brought to our mind once again how resilient the state of Maine is, that people, the workers, the businesses, and the most vulnerable businesses more often than not are those that smaller companies that kind of live on the edge, that have challenges, but they don't either have financial resources or so forth. And I'm not speaking for all of them, but generally speaking. And Maine is 80% fewer than 20 people. That's right. Small business. And yet, yes, we lost some, unfortunately, but those that survived are stronger than ever. And it speaks so well of where we are. And when you look at the measurements today, whether it's unemployment, whether it's job recovery, we still have a lot of jobs going unfilled. The demand is much greater than supply, but we're getting there. I mean, it's a journey.
And of course, statewide, we have this tremendous need for more workers. And you see the signs up, and whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a retail store, whether it's a manufacturer of some sort, everybody seems to need workers. And nobody really knows where they are. If a lot of my age and even younger have retired, some decided they had to stay home because of childcare. A lot of people have started their own thing, whatever it might be. Is that workforce problem holding us back significantly?
Oh, it's not. It is an issue. Is it holding us back? Probably, to a degree, certainly. But you also have to look at it analytically. And when you look at the baby boomer age, the number of people that were born in that time period versus those before, those after, oh my God, it's twice the number before, after. It's astounding. And a lot of those are at the age they moved on. Maybe the COVID encouraged, but the COVID also, we lost some parents because of the child care issue and schooling being closed. And so when you look at there's a lot of reasons why we may have lost some, be it retirement, be it two parents, whatever the case may be. But the solution is in a number of no one singular. For example, there are people with disabilities we could be doing more with. Veterans we could be stronger with. We could look at a very strong effort to attract people. Live and Work in Maine is constantly trying to bring people by marketing to them and inviting them and so forth. The COVID has brought people to our state that heretofore was probably vacationing here. But what they saw here in terms of safety, what they found in terms of how we were treating during our people during that COVID period, we saw, 35,000 net in a period of that 2 or 3 years. That's very, very positive. And then when you add to that the capacity to work remotely by virtue of the broadband,
I was going to say that a lot of those people brought their jobs with them.
Absolutely. And that opens the door to all kinds of opportunity in terms of bringing people here. You know, the younger generation, the Gen Z and so forth, that may like that mobility, to be able to live remotely in the rural parts of our state and be able to work in perhaps another state, because we see that today. That works in our favor, because people ask me all the time from other places, if you had to pick one word to describe your brand, what would it be? I say it's quality. Well, what do you mean by that? I said, well, quality of people, quality of place, and quality of our products. We're well known for putting out quality products in whatever we do. And there's a lot of products. You've had a number of shows on 207 in which you highlighted some of these products that many of us didn't even know about. All of that speaks so vividly to a positive future for Maine.
So when you talk to various businesses who are bemoaning their problem getting workers, or whatever else it might be, do you think they see these same kind of strengths that you just mentioned, or do you think it's easy for them to forget or overlook that in their own, when they're dealing with the crisis in front of them?
Oh, it's hard when you're dealing with a crisis right in front of you and you're trying to make ends meet and you realize you want to be open 5 days and you can only be open 2 or 3 days. Oh yeah, I mean, that has to be stressful, and I don't mean in any way to demean that or to say, don't worry, be happy. This is a mirage, it's going to go away. Oh, not at all. But I think there is so much, if we look through the lens of what do we have, where are we, and what are our issues. There isn't a state in this country that doesn't have issues. Many of them are the same, workforce and those types of issues. But every time I've been to a conference with peers in other states, whether it's city manager, commissioner now at the chamber, and I go thinking, oh, I got all these problems. I come home thinking, oh, I still have some problems, but thank God I don't have their problems. Because we lose sight of that perspective that I think very often and I'm not perfect at this, but very often we think that we carry the burden that nobody else has, when in truth,
Right.
we do have burdens.
Right. And when we look at the broader business economy in Maine, over the last, 6 months, there's been some good big things happened, right?
Oh, totally.
We had the Louisiana Pacific expansions up in Rustic
Yep.
with their forest products materials. We had New Balance, Shoe. Some of the other things happening in Maine are all, would seem to be, Sappy, big paper mill expansion, would seem to be good signs.
Oh, in order to grow, you've got to have people with confidence in your economy and are willing to invest. And when you look at the companies that have done that very thing, some of which you've outlined, and there are more, you've got to take stock of that. You've got to look at that and say, you know what? If they could put their money wherever they want it to be, and the fact that they're willing to invest in the state of Maine, that tells me that there is a positive element to what they see. There is a positive future, or they wouldn't be doing it. And I think we need to take stock of that, because that is so critical to our future. And they're going to have workforce shortages as well. But again, workforce shortages, we do have them, and perhaps a lot of it is attributed to our baby boomers being retired. But at the same time, you know, most states have a similar problem, varying degrees. So we're not unique in that respect. Mm-hmm. And those companies that are making investments tell us that they're doing it for a reason, and it's a good reason.
One of the things that the State Chamber, I think in conjunction perhaps with the Maine Development Foundation over the years has done, is sort of look at what parts of our economy we really ought to be trying to strengthen and push for the future, yeah. And what sectors and things like that. Are most of those that we've identified doing pretty well, do you think?
Oh yeah, I mean, truthfully, economic development, not to oversimplify, but sometimes it takes on a fad phenomena in which if something works out in Colorado, then we must do it. Yeah. And truthfully, we're not suited to it. And what we've come to realize is that fishing and farming and forestry is one of our greatest assets. Still, but it's done in a different way. It's technology driven, it's productivity. It's not what is different, which goes back to your first question. Those were still popular back then, but we kind of took our eye off the prize, perhaps, and tried to think outside to other alternatives, when in fact, it was still there, still with us. Mm-hmm. It's changed, but it's still fundamental to our economy and to our success. Right. As a matter of fact, you look at Focus Maine, mm-hmm. and they pick up on farm to food in terms of agriculture, aquaculture, but also biopharma. The whole bio industry type is so much promising. And one of the things that always strikes me is the role of innovation. And it was highlighted in the 10-year strategic plan, mm-hmm. that you need to be looking at new ways, new things, new opportunities. It drives your state's 50% of your growth is from innovation. And the other thing that strikes me that is so important to be thinking of, that in that report, it speaks to the fact that many of the jobs in the next 10 years don't exist today. But those that do will be driven by technology. So what we are finding from the mid-1990s on is the role of the digital economy, the role of technology, and how all of that fits in to the same industries, but in a different form.
You've also, part of your work has involved politics, not as a candidate, but as somebody who deals with those who attain office, and sometimes those who don't. It's been a tough time the last 6, 8, 10 years, really, for politics. How do you think we're doing? We've got a lot of division. Is that temporary, or does it concern you that it could last?
Oh, it would concern me if it did last. But and now I'm speaking of this. I'm certainly speaking of the state, not Washington. Washington's a whole different challenge.
We
but
can't fix that.
In the state, I was impressed this year so far in that the leadership, and 7 of the 10 leaders are new. And there tends to be, you're always going to have debate, you're always going to have discussion, you're always going to have some disagreement with what the administration proposes and the other party, how they look at it. That's nothing wrong with that. That's healthy, that's part of the equation. But when you die in the sword and refuse to collaborate, either I have to win, you have to lose, because if I lose, that means you win, and the extremes kind of force the issue, that's troublesome.
So what's your message to those who get elected then?
Don't disrespect compromise or collaboration. When you look over time and history, debate, discussion, all that is wonderful. It leads you to a better place more often than not. And to do that, you have to recognize that, okay, I may not be 100% correct. And compromise and collaboration is fundamentally a part of it. And I think that in the state, that can happen. And I think this time, it's early, but the tone of those who are speaking up, in spite of the fact there'll be those positions they'll disagree on, is more collaborative.
You've seen that so far?
Yeah. And I don't think that's just wishful thinking. I think that's valid. But I have tremendous respect for anybody that runs for public office, because you go there absolutely with the best of intentions to serve the public. I admire that.
If you were king of Maine for a day or two,
I'm not.
Would you? Maybe you are.
No,
would you?
No,
are there some fundamental changes in that political process you would make?
Well, I'd have to be king for a day in order to do it, because people have to believe and want to believe that there's a better way, and that they're willing to sacrifice their ideology or whatever it may be for the good of the state or whatever the issue may be. Now, there'd be a lot of people listening to this show that will be so infuriated with that position that I'm taking. But no, I'm not sure I could accomplish that even if I were king. But the truth is, I still support the notion that you can speak your mind, you can do so with respect, you should be listening to the other side. They may have a good point. And that relationships really, really do matter in life and in politics. And that when you consider all of that, boy, that does speak to compromise. Because if I listen to you and I'm not hung up on my position being the only position, and I do so with respect, and I value our relationship, that kind of tells me that I think there's a better decision than just mine alone.
I think a lot of times those in political office may get so vested in their own position that may not be willing to step back and say, okay, am I right about this? What about, is there any chance that what this person says is valid? Maybe that's the same point you're making.
I think it is. You said it better than I did.
Lucky.
Yeah, I do think that that's an impediment today, kind of a barrier, is attitudinal. But it does exist. Yeah. You can't say it doesn't.
And social media, of course, reinforces that.
Oh, big time. I mean, it allows people to say things that you wouldn't say to somebody's face, and they don't have to own it. And that doesn't help anything, in my opinion. Yeah. I'm sounding like Grampy, but it's true.
Yeah. Well, you're entitled, even though you're kind of young, to sound that way.
I am not too young to sound that way.
So, in the few minutes that we have left here, do you see a couple of major issues out there that Maine has not yet adequately confronted that we need to, aside from the workforce one?
Oh, I think the things that are contained within the 10-year strategic plan are all things that we're not quite there yet, but they tell us where we need to go and what we need to focus on, because you don't know. you don't know everything. I mean, if you try to do everything for everybody and address every priority, even though they don't have equal weight, it's not going to solve the problem. A strategic plan tells you those things and why they are a priority, and you stick to them. The one thing that our recent Make in Maine work that you referenced a moment ago, that really we should be looking at, the state came up with a 10-year strategic plan with 1,300 people. There was a climate action plan that looked at both the challenge but also the opportunity within our climate challenge. And we are advocating in that plan that we need to do the same thing with energy. We all know cost is a factor, and we all know that renewables are an important part of the solution, but do we really know how to get where we want to be and so forth? So having a plan that sets forth a direction with a sort of priorities, we advocate strongly that that's the next study. So I think that the mission is admirable. The goal is admirable. How to get there is what we're advocating for, is to put a plan that we can all see, understand, and try to coalesce, collaborate, and move forward on.
And is there, we already hear there's discord about expanding solar, there's discord about expanding wind power, discord about making more use of electric vehicles, all of that.
Yep.
And is that just the nature of the beast, or do we need to somehow, does someone, a governor, a legislature, whomever it might be, need to somehow exert more leadership?
All of the above are part of the solution. The fact that kind of debate and confusion exists is part and parcel of.
Because you're talking big change.
Big change, but it's all part of a new challenge or a new opportunity, and we're going in different directions. But out of that can come some significant progress. I'm not saying this very well. I hope you can read my mind, not what I'm saying. Is that a plan sort of puts in place? I'm not concerned that it's all bubbling up and each of them have their challenges and each represent an opportunity for us to move forward. What I am saying is that what we need now is to take those opportunities and put them in the form of a direction, and that direction will set forth how to deal with some of those challenges and how best and which should we work on first and how do we get to where we want to be. We turned our back on NECEC, which was $1 billion investment. We've got a challenge this fall in purchasing the private sector and creating something that's really unknown, untested, and quite risky in the hour power concept. That's not the best way, in my mind, to resolve complex issues. It is within the halls of the legislature, involving the public and the people. Yeah, you involve the public in a referendum, but it's not, you don't have any choice. It's either yes or no. You can't modify. And when something as complex as power or tax or investment, like we saw in our hydro opportunity, then in the halls of the legislature is the best place for that.
But it doesn't look like the initiative and referendum process is going to go away anytime soon.
No, it's been a priority for the chamber, and we continue to have as a chamber. We're not saying get rid of it, but maybe there are things that, for example, maybe you could have equal number of signatures be gathered in each of the 2 congressional districts, not just stand out on the streets of Portland or Lewiston and collect all the signatures. Right. And maybe you have the vote on major bond issues in an even number of years when you have a turnout, you have elections that bring out people. Things like that aren't, it would still require probably a 2/3 vote and then go to the voters for approval because it'd be a constitutional change, but at least that would take away some of the easy, maybe a bad choice of words, but the easier way of collecting signatures so that you can put it before the public. We're not advocating get rid of it. We're just having it to be a little more challenging to get in order to put it on the ballot. Tweaks.
Yeah. So as you prepare to step back from your role as president of the Maine Chamber and one hopes have a little more rest and less intensity of involvement in a lot of these issues. As you look at Maine, how are we in a stronger position as a state overall, economically, socially, politically, than we were 30 years ago? Or is it just different?
Oh, I think it's both different, and I think it's stronger. I firmly believe that in every challenge, there is that, I know it sounds to some hokey to say this, but it's true. For every challenge that we've had, we come out stronger. And that's in part just because of what we talked about earlier, the resilience of Maine people, the fact they look out for each other, they support each other, the entrepreneurial spirit is alive and well. Yeah, it's been a struggle, but for every struggle, when you look at our state with its limited population, and you look at other states that you got to take stock that Maine punches above its weight, and we do pretty well. It is different. We talked about that earlier. The economy of the past still remains a strong part of where we are today in the future, but technology today is surely not what it was then. It's more a part of your story and your success. Mm-hmm. And
are you optimistic for the future of Maine?
You need to know, as long as you know me, that I'm always optimistic. But yes, absolutely.
We're headed in the right direction.
We've got a strategic plan that sets forth what we need to focus on, and if we do, I don't think there's any question. The federal monies that we receive, thanks to our delegation in large part, has been used to address some of the needed issues. And there is debate right now over the budget and tax relief. That's all healthy, that's good. That makes us a responsive state and so forth. So I make no excuses for feeling very positive about the future.
Well, Dana, thank you very much for talking with me. I'm sorry that they put you in the position of having to answer the questions and not ask them.
Yeah, I'm sorry for that too, but I've been waiting for that. You ought to see the questions that I do have.
Okay, give me one.
No.
You don't want to embarrass me.
No, I don't want to embarrass myself for being so uninformed.
Thank you very much. You've served the people of Maine in many ways for a long time, so thank you.
Well, when you find what you love and you love what you're doing, then it's not as hard as you think. And I was lucky.
Good.
Thank you, my friend. It's a pleasure once again. That is our Maine Take for today, and this could well be the last Maine Take, at least for me. We hope it continues because it does provide us the opportunity to share with you some of those issues, some of those initiatives and ideas, and most of all, I was hoping to interview my friend, and maybe I'll have to come back and do that someday. Thank you very much. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.